Well, hello, Rivers Crossing. Welcome to our little podcast here. My name is Josh. I'm the creative arts pastor here at Rivers Crossing. I'm joined by Rand Stevens, who's our worship pastor, and special guest today is Shelby Lust, who's joining us. So,
hello.
Shelby, thanks for making some time for us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So if you come to Rivers Crossing, then you certainly know who Shelby is. You've seen her on the stage singing a bunch. Rand, obviously, you know her way better than I do. So for those of us that don't know you well, tell us a little bit about you. You're married, right?
I am married. Yeah, my husband and I serve on the worship team. My husband, you'll see him playing keys pretty much every single Sunday up on the main stage or at Deer Park. We've been together since 2016 and got married back in 2020, pandemic wedding. We have 2 pups, fur babies. Those are our kids. And we both work for the same company, Tyler Technologies. I work in marketing and he works in HR. So yeah.
Very cool. Deep question right out of the gate. Who is more musically talented, you or Aaron?
Ooh, gosh. Killing me.
Rand, why don't you vote first, Rand? Who do you know? I won't put Rand in that position.
Yeah, it depends. How do you define musical talent?
Okay, so Aaron clearly wouldn't need qualifying questions if you were the one.
You're right. You're right. He knows more.
So we're in this series called Seek First, and just talking all about the kingdom, and loved your story, loved your testimony, and wanted to hear more about that and share that with more people. So Tell me what your life looked like before Jesus.
It was a mess. It's crazy because I don't really talk much about it, but I was definitely the type of person to claim that I was a Christian, but my life did not reflect it whatsoever. I did not necessarily grow up in church. I started off as a kid going to a church, and then kind of dropped off. My family dropped off out of going to church, and never really went back until college time. But even then, like, my life just did not reflect it. I was a broken person, not a very nice person, just very into worldly things, drinking, partying, all those kinds of things. So definitely God changed my life in many ways. Anyone who knows me from my previous self would be able to attest to that. So, yeah.
So, all right. So you go away to college.
Yeah.
And someone else invites you to come check out at a church?
Yeah. So my aunt actually started coming to Rivers Crossing. My cousin, my aunt's son, has grown up going to church his entire life. Like, that was what he did every single week. He was at, youth group and everything. And I always, wondered what that was about. He would take me to youth group every once in a while. I always wondered what that was about, but I always felt this like sense of judgment. Not necessarily from him or the church. I think it was just me feeling insecure about actually stepping into a church because of my lifestyle and the way that I was acting. So back then it didn't seem that way. But now that I am in faith, the way that my cousin acted and, showed God through himself, honestly is what I strive to be like. I mean, he was so true to himself his entire life and never deterred away from what he believed in, who he was. And so, my aunt and her family started coming here a long time ago, back in 2016, and invited us. We came a couple of times just, throughout college, but I lived 45 minutes away up at Wright State. So it was like impossible for me to come home on weekends when I was an RA. So I would be on duty on weekends and stuff like that. And then once I graduated in 2018, I got engaged to Aaron on my graduation day. And then we were like, okay, well, if we're going to be, stepping into faith, then we need to find a church together. But really my momentum didn't start until then with God. So, yeah. Okay.
So I share some of that background of like growing up in church, but not taking it serious. Right. If you would have asked me, I probably would have said I was a Christian, but
exactly,
it was a word. And then coming back to faith, that like college age. So then you stepped into it. You're like, okay, I'm all in. I'm serious this time. I'm sold out for Jesus. And then all the big stuff comes up, right? Of the things you actually have to legitimately change in your life, so you look like a follower of Jesus. And for this series, obviously, we want to lean heavily into the finances. So tell me about what that journey was like for you of, okay, I'm taking Jesus serious, and that means tithing. Did you wrestle with that? What was that process like?
I think everybody wrestles with that when they first start that conversation. It was a series back in 2018 or 2019, like an entire series on tithing that we did. And, Aaron and I had just started serving on team and getting involved. I think I actually was not serving yet. Aaron started serving first. He wanted to lean into it more, which ultimately led me to the way that he was getting involved. I was like, that's what I want. I want to be involved in, help people find Jesus. And, but again, the worldly human that I am, I automatically think of like my finances as my own. And, it was I had just graduated college, and I'm finally making money to where I can, pay my car payment and like have some leftover, you know what I mean? And so it was a very specific sermon that Jeff Sharp was preaching that day. We had been throughout this whole series of tithing, and Aaron and I would go home every Sunday and talk about, okay, should we do this? I don't know. Like, I don't know if we should do this. Why do we have to do this? Like, there's plenty of people that give, right? It doesn't have to be us. We can't afford to do this right now. But still there was that pulling of, our spirits of, no, I feel like we should do this. And finally we got to this sermon with Jeff Sharp, and we were like, no, this is what I want to do. And actually it was me who I was like, no, I want to do this. And Aaron was like, no, like we're not doing it. So it was a point of like going home and having a discussion. And, looking back now, when you get married, it's obviously like, our finances are together. So, but I was like, well, I'm doing my paycheck and you can do whatever you want to do. But I will say, I wouldn't recommend that necessarily, but the boldness of me stepping out and doing that also led him to, and our family to step into that tithing. So it was a really difficult decision, and it didn't stop there. I mean, it is a complete change in heart posture. It's a complete change in mindset, and lifestyle. You build your lifestyle around tithing. You no longer build your life around, and then give tithe. So, we started digging into our budget and seeing if it was something we could do. And then the conversation came up like net or gross and all this stuff. Yep. And I feel like everybody struggles with that. And eventually it was just like, I'm done talking about it. Like, let's just try it. That's literally what we said. Let's just try it. And see what happens. Yeah. And it was not easy at first. We would there were times where, our lifestyle was exceeding, the amount that we had to be able to tithe. However, we quickly shifted because Aaron and I are very specific on like, we don't want to be overdrawn in our account. We want to be very specific on making sure that we have what we need. And so our lavish lifestyle when we graduated college, buying new cars, going out to eat all the time, going shopping, all this stuff, even though we didn't necessarily have the money to do that anyways. But you like finally get freedom of some sorts after college and you're like, woohoo, let's go. So we did have to completely change the way that we lived. And it's funny to see how many blessings came from this entire process. But in the midst of it, it was a struggle. It was a huge struggle for us to not like stop tithing because, well, I don't want to not be able to go out to eat. Yeah. I want to get this, I want to get floor mats for my car. Like if I had my tithe back, I would be able to do that right now. Yeah. And so again, it is a complete shift in your perspective of what tithing is and how important it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had the the joy of getting to kind of walk through a lot of these stages in your and Aaron's kind of spiritual growth. What she didn't say earlier is that Aaron and Shelby both are part-time on our worship staff as well. Shelby handles our young adult worship ministry on Tuesday nights, and Aaron handles the all the training of all of our new team as they're coming in to learn how to be a part of team. So I've gotten to walk through a lot of this with you guys. And the classic scripture we talk about when we talk about tithing is the Malachi 3:10, bring all the tithe into the storehouse so there will be food in my house. Test me in this, see if I won't throw open the windows of heaven so that you'll have more blessing than you'll have room enough to receive. And one of the things that we have talked about kind of throughout the years is this concept after you guys had started tithing is just because of all the things we've seen God do, now we know that we can't afford not to tithe.
Absolutely.
And one of those examples was we talked recently about you guys got a new house recently and all of the craziness in how that came together and kind of the miraculous provisions in how God showed up in leading to you guys being able to actually close on it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of how all that went down and how God worked in that situation?
It's crazy. And I mean, God has just shown up so many times since we started tithing. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but it's so true. I mean, through promotions, through job changes, there's no way to explain how all these things lined up so perfectly other than God. And through a lot of prayer and faith and trust. But specifically with our house, we had been looking for a house for a couple months maybe, and the housing market is just insane right now. Mm-hmm. Finding a house that is like move-in ready with, the finances that we have was just not realistic. But it was weird. Aaron found our house. He specifically was looking on Zillow or something like that. And he was like, I think we should go look at this house. And we showed up. Our realtor was like, you're not going to like this house. Like, I promise you. And I was like, well, let's just try it. We've looked at many houses at this point, so we might as well. Right. Mm-hmm. So we walk in and I immediately felt it in my spirit. It's just, I did not have this feeling with any other houses I've had this feeling before where I know that this is something different. Walked in, it was a mess. There were 7 different shades of brown and holes in the walls and everything. But the bones were good. And yeah. I was like, I love the layout, and we walked upstairs and I started envisioning us having kids and my gosh, this could be the perfect layout for a family. And we could literally stay here for a while, a very long while. So then it comes time to actually put an offer in, which is the entire stress of the game at this point, right? Because you're up against 40 other families going how much over asking price. Yeah. And so we put in actually an offer below asking price, and we were the first and only, and they accepted it right away. And it was wait, what? Yeah. But leading up to that, when we were deciding to put an offer in on the house, we went home. I was like, I don't know. I really think that's the house. Because we saw some other houses afterwards. And I was like, it doesn't feel the same. I'm telling you. Mm-hmm. And it was stressful because we were talking, it would be a significant jump in payment for our lifestyle. We were living very comfortably in our previous house. It was a first-time house, first-time home for us. And we renovated it, and it was back before all of this housing stuff happened. So we actually had a really good price on the house. So Aaron and I both work from home a majority of our week, and he was in one office, I was in the other office, and he just kept coming back and forth and was like, hey, so Brooke's calling me and she's saying that we got to put this offer in, you got to sign this paperwork. And it was just chaos all over the place. And he was like, do you think we can do it? Do you think we can handle it? Do you think the payment is in the right place? And we didn't know the payment at the time because we just knew the overall. So we kind of did rough calculations. And I was like, I need you to get out of my office. Go, get out of my office. I'm closing the door. I got to pray and figure this out.
That's the most married couple conversation I've ever had. Yeah.
And so he like walked away, and I brought up our budget, and I just like bowed my head, and I was like just asking God, like, give me something here. Like, it feels right? It feels right in my spirit. And then this like peace just like overcame my body, and it was literally God speaking to me, literally saying, you're going to be in this house for the next 10 years, and this is what your payment's going to be. And I was like, okay. So then I looked at my budget, and I'm like, this is more than doable for us. I started looking and moving around things, and I was like, I didn't realize, I mean, like we've felt strapped before in previous months and everything with the budget that we had. And then we go and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, what is happening here? Like, it just didn't register in my mind. And like at that moment, Aaron opens the door and he goes, just got off the phone with Brooke. This is what the payment is. And it was exactly what God told me it was going to be. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that's it. Like, that's the decision. Like, we have to put an offer in on this house. And then the chaos starts. Because if that wasn't chaos enough, they accepted the offer. We had to go through inspections, all these things. I was selling the house, my current house, to my mom. And that's also, just a lot of stress in itself. You're mixing, personal life with selling a house. But it was just wild. So our previous house was older, and it had a roof that was like 15 years old. My mom had an FHA loan. So it was like, if they came and inspected the house and they said that we needed a new roof, then we would not be able to close in time on our new house. And of course, there's these options of like, okay, can we offer the person that we're buying the house from like money so that we can like keep it into like, don't sell it or whatever. The guy was pretty adamant about like, nah, I can just rent this out tomorrow. So like, it's either you do it or, it's gone kind of thing. So, which was, stressful. It was extremely stressful on myself and Aaron, because that was like the time where you're like, do we do this? Like, is this the right decision? Do we sell it to my mom? And we ended up putting the house on the market as well so that my mom could get things in order. But timing wise, we couldn't afford to not put the house on the market at the time. Because if she did not get everything in order by a certain date, we were going to lose our new house. And so we ended up getting like 8 different offers on our house. And we told my mom, like, hey, if you can get your stuff in on time, like, we will sell it to you. Like, we are people of our word. It'll happen. Well, we ended up getting 8 different offers, really great offers. And people would like write us stories and stuff. And it was just like amazing to see that happen. And like literally noon, we were making a decision at 6 p.m. on a Monday. Noon on Monday, my mom's like, hey, I got all my stuff in. And we were like, oh my gosh, like that's insane. And it was an internal battle. Like, we have better offers on the table, more secure offers that are not FHA loans that would secure us getting our house, no problem. And Aaron and I are pretty big on integrity and people of our word. And so I was like, I can't not sell my mom this house. Like, it's just not how we are. It was a lot of pressure and stress on us both, because like if anything went wrong, we would lose our new house. Anything in the process that went wrong, we would lose our new house. And that was where, it's funny because literally right before all this happened, I started doing a Bible study on trusting God. And of course, like the moment that I do that, he like gives me the ultimate stress test of trusting him. And so I was like, nope, like I still feel in my spirit, like this is going to be okay. And it's going to happen. Yep. Like I'm sticking to it. I know. And luckily time passed, the inspections came back, everything was good. And we were like, sweet, smooth sailing. No, not smooth sailing. So the funds for my mom's loan, we were like down to the wire. it was ultimately going to end up being like she wasn't going to get the funds in time for us to close on our previous house, for then us to close on our new house, because we were using the equity to roll over into our new house. And it was an experience for sure. Like constant, like following up, like, hey, like, is this happening? And literally like the day of our 15-year anniversary here, we were outside serving, and my mom calls me and she's like, you have to have your funds in the bank within like 72 hours of closing. And this was like dead on 72 hours of closing. We had given up at that point. Like we had just accepted the fact that it was probably not going to happen. And like, we were like, okay.
I remember talking to the two of you that morning and you guys saying this probably isn't going to come through. We're probably going to have to like scramble. And I remember you walking away from the table, taking that phone call at the Saturday of the 15-year event, coming back and being like, yes, we got it.
It happened. And it was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that lined up that way. And like literally it was down to the hour of it. And like God pulled through. We ended up closing and it worked out great. Like we were able to stay in our previous house for a month while we renovated our new house, did all the work ourselves, and we were able to move into a clean slate into this new house. And now my mom has a house of her own, and it was beautiful. It was amazing.
So what would your advice be to someone in that same situation? Because one of the things that you mentioned was, I think a lot of couples rob themselves of spiritual growth because they're scared to bring up tough conversations with their spouse. And that could be about a bunch of topics, but finances are the big one. So
absolutely.
My always my concern is that, we preach a message on tithing or on giving or generosity or whatever it's called in the moment, and both couples feel the tension and neither one of them is brave enough to have the conversation. So life just carries on because neither one of them has the boldness to say, we should do this. And certainly no one has the boldness to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to heaven. And, and I wish couples were almost willing to have the fight, especially when it comes to finances. So that's always my challenge to couples. So, just really cool you were able to do that. And that Aaron then followed you into that, and your heart's got in a good place.
Yeah, I'm definitely blessed to have a spouse that, although questions my challenge, he trusts me enough and is willing to support me in decisions that I make. He's also, a 3 on the Enneagram, and he's very logical. He's got to have logic behind, everything. So, taking it to him and being like, no, this is how I feel like this is what we need to do is not necessarily the the way to get, he's like, okay, well, we're not doing this based off feelings. But like we have grown immensely together through those hard conversations. It's not always been easy. But I think even now, like looking at us, I hear from the Holy Spirit on a frequent basis. And Aaron also now hears from us. Like there was a time where it didn't necessarily match up completely. Or maybe like one of us was trying to figure out what it was. And the other was like, no, I think this is like the Holy Spirit. Like, but now it's like, there's no question of it. So I think through those bold steps has really grown our faith even more.
You just have to speak to his Enneagram 3 by saying, do you know there's people that are tithing more than us in this church?
Yes.
Like, what? Not tomorrow, there's not.
That's right.
What advice would you give to a couple or someone who's in a relationship, who's married and is now feeling that tension themselves of, maybe the spouse that doesn't manage the finances wondering, are we tithing? Or the one that does manage the finances saying, we should tithe. Like, what advice would you give them in that season how do you bring this up to your spouse? How do you have this conversation?
I mean, I've heard this so many times across the board. Like I even grew up with my family talking about tithing, not necessarily since we weren't in the church, but there was this, generalized view of what tithing was. And I've heard so many times people say like, oh, we literally cannot. We literally cannot afford to do it. I think starting the conversation is key for the person that is not necessarily is feeling it more so than the spouse, pray about it. Ask God to order your steps, show up within those conversations, and then actually take an actual step to talk to your spouse. In a marriage, that person is supposed to be the confidant, the person that you can go to with any struggle. But if you don't have God at the center of those conversations, or even before the conversation starts, it can be a difficult conversation for sure. So I would just suggest pray about it. If God is pulling on your heartstrings to take that next step, look more into it, and start looking at your budget. Like, can you make this happen? What things can you take away that you don't necessarily need in your life? I've heard a lot of couples struggle with this before, where they're like, again, I literally cannot afford this. But then they look at their budget and they're, spending $35 on streaming services here. And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's do a deep dive, and see what you can actually do, before, if you have an Enneagram 3 husband, maybe that's what you start off with. Do the research and bring, a solution to the table. Yeah,
I think that's wise. I'm so thankful that my parents modeled this as a young age for me, so I always saw it. So that would be different from me and you. I think that I grew up in a home where it was like a cornerstone of we always tithe, and I'm very thankful that I started tithing when I was 17 and got saved and didn't have to have, it was a much smaller check when I worked at Cedar Point and was like, God wants $4. You got it, God. Here's my $4.
Well, that brings up a good point. So she spoke to how like you didn't really grow up as much in church with this as like a discipline in your family that was like modeled. I kind of did. My parents were pastors and stuff like that. But I think a good thing, you're talking about how your parents modeled it for you. My kids are really young, so it's probably a little early for me to start trying to model it to my 2-year-old and my 10-month-old.
Yeah.
But your kids are a little older than mine, starting to grasp the concept of money and stuff like that. What things are you doing as a parent? For any of the parents that are watching, what are some good ways that you found success modeling this for your kids that they can maybe model for theirs?
Yeah. So Tina, my wife, and I, we sat down several years ago and decided we just wanted to be very, very intentional about teaching our kids good habits with not just the tithing, but with just finances in general. So they never got to that place where they were trying to figure out, how do I survive? So we started giving them, my youngest is about to turn 7 and he would have been 4 at the time. So every week we give them $1 for however many years old they are. So the math's easy on Malachi. He's 10 right now. So we'll use him as an example. So he's 10. So every Sunday night we sit down and I give him 10 $1 bills. I'll ask him, how old are you? He'll say 10. I count out 10 $1 bills. And then I say, where's the first 10% go? And he says, Jesus. And I'll take $1 away and say, why? And he'll say, because it's scriptural. We're supposed to live generous lives. Like, okay. And then I'll say, where's the next 10% go? And he'll say, savings. And I take that $1 back and I say, why? And he goes, for emergencies. So that $1 I take back and I keep. And then every week, $1 transfers automatically out of my bank account into a high yield savings account for him. So he probably has it's got a little bit less in it because we pull some money out for some investing things, which I'll talk about in a second. But he probably has like $200 in his savings account as a 10-year-old. And then I'll say, what's the third 10%? And I'll pull that $1 away. And he'll say investing. I'm like, why do we invest? And he'll say to build wealth. So I take that. Then he's got $7. I'm like, okay, these are yours. So he puts those in his safe. He can spend those $7 on whatever he wants. That third $1, same thing. It automatically comes out of my checking account into a special app, and it just invests in a Vanguard mutual fund. So he's got like $600 in there. We do that. I call it the rule of tens. We do it for everything. So my mom will give all the kids like $50 on Christmas, and I'll get cash out and I'll sit down and here's $50, $5, first 10%. Where's it go? Jesus. Next 10% savings, and I'll transfer manually $5 over. Third 10% investing, and then I let them pick what they want to invest in. So they have, my two boys own a lot of Dave and Buster's because they want to invest in like what they're passionate about, which I think is really cool. And then when their savings account, I'm like, hey, you've got a couple $100s in here, and that's more than you need at your age for an emergency. So let's pull $100 out and invest it, and you can pick what you want to invest it in. So I'm just trying to teach them those habits early, and then like if you live on 70%, you can honor God. You can not stress about emergencies, and you can build wealth for the future, and trying to teach them how to create some generational wealth. And it sounds expensive. So I've got, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old. She's like, oh my goodness, that's, it's $20 a week you're spending, and it's only going to become more and more. But all we did was have them spend that money on the things that we normally would have bought. So that random $5 toy in Target that normally we would have bought, we've been like, you've got money. Do you want to buy it?
It's great.
Or we even went shoe shopping, and I made this up on the spot, and they don't know it. So Kai's looking at like $40 shoes that he wants to buy for school, and instead of just saying, "Yeah, we'll buy them," I was like, "The budget was $30." He's like, "I really want these. Can I spend $10 to make up the difference?" Of course you can. So we're also teaching them like how to spend, when to spend. What's been really cool is they'll go to, like, say Target. They'll go and they'll be looking at multiple things. And they'll be like, or even with the shoe shopping, these shoes are $80. And I'm like, okay, well, you can buy them, but it's $50 of your money. Or you can buy these $40 shoes and it's $10 of your money. And seeing a 10-year-old like weigh $10 versus $50 and going, I'm going to buy the $40 ones. That will only cost me $10 instead of $50. And already teaching him at 10 the balance of how do I not overspend? What's the value of money? So yeah, we've been doing that for a few years. It's been pretty impactful. My daughter just turned 12 recently turned 12. When she went into 7th grade, we got her a bank account. So now her whole thing is digitally. She's got a debit card, and so she can see when she's got money on there. So it's been super powerful for them so far.
I love that, because for those that did not grow up with this principle being modeled to them like that, it can be way harder to instill that into your life when you've not been doing that, because now you're reallocating, like what you were talking about, you're reallocating your budget and all of that stuff to then honor God. But the great thing, your kids are going to grow up and never have known anything different. Yeah.
That's my hope, is that number one, they don't know anything different other than honoring God first on the gross.
That's right.
And then number two, that they just don't deal with all the financial stress that everyone deals with. Yeah. They always live on that 70%. They'll never know anything different than that. So I think I preach one of the weeks in this series on the 29th, and I'm gonna hit some of these topics from the stage as well, because I think they're incredibly powerful if you can get these into kids. I always have respect for people who, especially when you get into like your 30s and you're like, we're gonna start tithing, and again, my first tithing check was $4. So this has just been a habit that I don't feel the pain of it. I make more money, I give more money.
So true.
But if all of a sudden you're 35 years old and your first tithe check is $500, it's like, whew, my hat is off, because that took some bravery to write that check. So trying to teach my kids before they get to that point and have to have that tough challenge.
That's great.
I love that.
Just start it with your kids now, just like 8 dimes.
Yeah, well, my kid, he's 2.5. He'd probably grab all the dimes and just throw them over his head or something. And then Dash, who's 10 months, would probably just try and eat them. So I might wait a little bit, but yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being vulnerable. My prayer is always that someone's story when we're vulnerable with our stories, that those impact someone, and that's scriptural, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So I hope you inspired somebody today.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Of course. Thanks, Shelby.
Thanks.